everyone. You're watching We Heart Therapy, the special series EFT Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Anabelle Bugatti, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified EFT supervisor and therapist here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I am so excited today because we have a special guest with us. It is Dr. Clare Rosoman. She is a licensed clinical psychologist. She's also an EFT trainer in Australia. She's co-director of the Australia Center for EFT, along with our other trainer, Jenny Fitzgerald. And she does really amazing work for the field, and she teaches and trains in emotionally focused therapy. And we are so excited to welcome her onto our show today. And we are going to be talking about kind of a hot topic, which is pornography, sex addiction. What does this have to do with couples? Why is this a problem? And how do we work with this as EFT therapists and an EFT and understand it through an attachment lens? So thank you, Dr. Rosoman, for being on the show. And can I just call you Claire?
Of course. It's lovely to be here. It's very exciting.
Thank you so much. And we're just so thankful to have you. And if you can kind of start us off, maybe we can talk about why pornography is such a controversial topic, and how do we kind of think about pornography use how do we understand it through an attachment lens?
Well, I think part of the reason it's such a controversial topic is that it touches into real sensitivities for people. And I think one of the things I find most helpful is to remind myself that I'm not here to pathologize porn itself or any sexual behavior or lifestyle that's not the same as mine, but more to try and align with my clients where they are and be really respectful of their lifestyles or their sexual interests. And it's not up to me to decide what's sex positive or sex negative for them. So I wanted to learn more about this area because I wanted to know, is porn harmful? Is porn fine? When does it become problematic and why? And so I think it helped me to just get across what all the research is saying about pornography and to look at it through that attachment lens of how would I work with relationships where one or more members of the partnership have a struggle with pornography. And so I think
so if I can catch what you're saying, and I really want you to share what you've learned from the research. So what I think I hear you saying is, when it comes to couples and relationships, that porn becomes such a hot topic because it touches on sensitivities. And I know there are a lot of disagreements between partners, between maybe genders, about what is okay and what's not okay and how often, and it can create a lot of tender feelings within a relationship when one person feels like their partner turns to porn instead of turning to them, like they're sharing something with someone else that they're not sharing with them. And so it really has become, and society by and large really does normalize or, kind of say it's okay. And as therapists, I love how you say it's not up to us to really decide whether or not a couple should or shouldn't be watching porn. But we do want to understand the health of it, right? Like what's happening, how is it working in the relationship? Is it working in the relationship? Is it not working, right? Is it creating problems? And so we want to understand what are the potential problems that it could be causing. What does the research say about these problems? So what have you found in terms of this?
Well, it certainly seems that porn, it doesn't become a problem for all people. In fact, for some people, it can be a huge help. Like if it's made by and for excluded people, for instance, then it can be enormously helpful for them to see people like them through an erotic lens, and it can be really affirming. But sometimes the messages in porn are really negative and can set up like sexual scripts of expectations that can be harmful. So it doesn't become a problem for everyone, but we just need to understand a bit more about why it does become a problem for some and when. And so in terms of the relationship, I think it can pose some threats depending on the way the couple have talked about it. So we need to know how all parties in the relationship feel about porn and what agreements they might have between them about the presence of porn in their life. Like some couples never talk about it at all and assume that it's not being looked at, or if it is, they don't want to know, where others will be really open about the use of porn and they might use it together or separately, and that might feel totally okay. They might have some agreements around what type of porn is okay and what isn't. They might have some boundaries, but it does feel like those discussions, they are really helpful for us in figuring out how big a threat porn is posing and why. So I feel like that's a big part of it, but then also looking at are there discrepancies in their beliefs about porn? Do they have shared ideas? Because that's sort of the foundation of whether this feels threatening to their bond or not, I think.
Yeah. But really, when couples aren't able to come together and connect over their own ideas, their own definition within the context of the relationship, what's okay, what's not okay, how often, it's when couples aren't able to come together around that, it's when it really does cause a lot of problems.
Yes.
And what does research say about pornography use? What have you found?
Well, it seems to be a problem in two ways. One is if there's a discrepancy in beliefs about pornography, then there's going to be bigger problems. So typically the research has been conducted on heterosexual monogamous couples. And there's definitely a gendered pattern where 3 to 4 times more men than women are using pornography. And so when it shows up in the relationship, it can be due to a discrepancy in beliefs about pornography. And when that happens, then often the female partners will report low sexual satisfaction, low female sexual desire, communication problems, and then even in couples where they have shared beliefs about porn, they still can have problems, as you were saying before, where one partner is turning away from the other and putting more resources and time into pornography, then they can feel more disconnected. Another interesting part of that is males can, frequency of use is correlated with low female desire and male sexual.
So wait. I want to make sure that I'm getting this, because this is really good stuff. Okay, so what I think I hear you saying, and you tell me. So if females use porn, they have low sexual desire outside of the porn.
Males. So female partners. If
the males, okay, because you'd said something like a couple seconds ago about low female, the female partner reporting low desire. This is if the male partner is using. So the female partner knows that their partner is using it. It somehow impacts the female partner, even if she's not using it. Her libido, her sexual energy in the relationship. What do we know what accounts for that?
Well, I can only sort of extrapolate from my own clinical experience. And I think what I've heard people say is that it's the negative comparison. That can be a big part of it.
Do they feel like their partner is comparing them to the porn girls, or do they kind of get in their own head, like there's no, like my body doesn't look like a porn actress, so I feel shame because I'm never going to look like her and I don't want you to see me?
Yeah, I reckon both. I would say both. And it's also, I mean, interestingly, some researchers looked at sexual scripts and that how by watching.
What do we mean when we say sexual script? Because I know a lot of clients have found these videos and they may not know what we mean by sexual script. Can you give me a definition?
So it's like a pattern of behavior, like a blueprint of what to do in what situation. It's like a behavioral
template
to follow. Like a template. And so if porn acts as your behavioral script
template
to follow, Yeah,
Yeah.
particularly mainstream porn. I think I want to make the distinction there that I think a lot of the sorts of images and video in mainstream porn is very different from what you might find in ethical porn or more niche porn. But if someone's looking at mainstream porn and that acts as a sexual script, well, that's not necessarily wonderful. That's sort of the opposite
Right.
of
Because
what people.
mainstream, well, and so I want you to maybe define what's different about mainstream porn versus not mainstream porn. But what I think you're also saying is, when your template is around porn, porn doesn't necessarily represent what actual
Yeah.
normal sex looks like. And
Yes.
so people may have these ideas based on porn that are maybe abnormal or kind of extreme. And
Yes.
so they may have expectations that this is what porn is supposed to look like. And when the average person doesn't meet up with that, then
Yeah.
in-person sex can feel very unsatisfying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
For
what
sure.
constitutes mainstream porn versus non-mainstream porn? Or
Well, I think one of the biggest differences is that mainstream porn is free. And so to make it a money-making venture, it has to have advertising. And so they want to grab the viewer quickly and hold them there so that they can bounce ads up. And so typically mainstream porn has very little interpersonal connection, is straight into the sex act, is not about connection and storytelling. And also, as people click and search to try and find a clip, especially if they have some sort of worn out pleasure response, then people get caught in a pattern where they're searching and clicking, trying to get that dopamine drip with the click. And then that coupled with a worn out pleasure response means that people are not going to stay put in one clip for very long. So that means that the clips get more and more extreme to grab people's attention, which
so,
is,
okay, so let's talk about this because this is really good. So this kind of sounds like addiction, right? So when I
yeah,
hear you, so what I think people need to know is that watching porn like actually stimulates pleasure response chemicals in your brain, right? So
yeah,
that happens. And it's like, when you start viewing the porn online and the clicks and the way the even just the technology is set up, the way it tries to reach towards you neurologically and psychologically can kind of start to create this addiction cycle where being there for a short amount of time no longer does it, whereas maybe in the beginning it worked, kind of like
mhm,
if
mhm.
if we were to substitute it with like tequila, right? It'd be like one shot no longer does it. Now I
Yeah,
need four to get the
yeah,
same, release, the
yes,
same feeling, right? And so it
yeah.
increases, you have to have more and more and more. And in the case of porn, it's more extreme stimulus to create the same effect. So it kind of
It's,
like might have a progression.
it certainly can for some. And I sort of feel like, to take it in order, the way my brain is working, we need to understand the reason and the function of the use of pornography for that particular person. Because for some people, it might have an addictive component where, as you're saying, they have increased craving despite the negative consequences and despite attempts to stop this. And they have increased craving. They find themselves going back and then searching and searching and getting the worn out pleasure response. So they never quite get the satiation. So that could be a component, but also it could be related to impulse control. Like, it feels good, so I do it. And I don't think it through very much, and I do it, and that's that. It
I don't
could
even
be,
try to stop it. It just feels good, so I just let myself get into it.
yeah. But it also could have a compulsive element to it as well, where it takes away a bad feeling. And
Okay.
that, I
So
think, is
wait, so
important.
so compulsive thing, right, is it could take away a bad feeling, but what if like so I have a lot of clients who don't even recognize having a feeling, but the way they describe their porn use does sound very compulsive because I'll ask, what are you feeling when you turn to the porn or what does it do for you? And they're like, I don't know, nothing.
Mm,
Like I don't it's just a habit. A lot of them describe it as a habit and they don't a lot of them will say, well, I don't eat, maybe I don't get an erection anymore. I don't get aroused by it. I don't even like self-stimulate, masturbate during it.
Yes.
And so it's like they're looking at it, but they're it's not doing anything for them, but yet they
Yeah.
keep looking at it and they don't even know why they're looking at it. They just know they keep
Mm.
looking at it and they're saying like, this is just a habit. So would that also kind of fall along the lines of compulsion?
Yeah, like if we put that in the EFT frame and we work backwards, we know that's then the action tendency. So that's a coping strategy. And we want to work backwards from that to fill in the rest of the pieces of the puzzle here around
Mhm.
what is that helping someone cope with. And maybe they don't have a
Mhm.
lot of awareness. Like I'm sort of looking for three things separate from addiction. Those three things are, is this just impulsivity? Is there a bit of a track record of just impulsively doing things without thinking through? Um, is this a compulsive element where there is acknowledged negative emotion like anxiety or stress, and that this helps them mitigate that negative feeling? Or is this a pattern of avoidant coping? And we certainly know that looking at porn is related to an avoidant attachment style. And I think it sounds to me like what you're describing there is maybe more of an avoidant coping, where someone's not overly aware of what's happening inside because they've learned to turn away
Mhm.
and kind of squish down their emotional
Mhm.
places and not visit them. And they have to use various strategies to help them do that.
Mhm.
So I don't know, how does that sit with you?
Or- and porn could be a way, like maybe even if they're bored, instead of turning to their
Yeah.
partner to say, hey, like let's go have fun together, it's like, I'm just going to look at porn, like,
Yes, it's
you know.
certainly safer. It's controllable for someone with maybe a more avoidant attachment style who's learned to be self-reliant rather than to turn to another to co-regulate. It kind of makes sense that with porn, it's there, it's totally self-managed, and there isn't the risk of interpersonal closeness. I saw one man who preferred to chat to people online and look at porn sites because he felt really anxious about getting to know people, and really felt like once they got to know him, they wouldn't like him. And so online, there was that natural distance there that really helped him. He still wanted the connection, but in a very safe, disconnected way.
Right. Like very low risk where he
Yes.
wouldn't feel rejected.
Yes.
So so
Yeah.
how do you help people if they don't have a lot of awareness and they just kind of report, I do this just out of a habit, right?
Yeah.
And maybe at one time they were more aware of doing it for specific reasons, but it became more compulsive and they don't even, those reasons may not even exist, but they just keep going to it because they've not learned anything else to turn to when they're
Mm.
bored or whatever.
Yes.
How
Yep.
do you help them become aware of what's underneath the habit?
Well, I think this is where EFT really shines, because we want to lean in with curiosity and explore what happens if we work backwards from the action tendency. This is where I love emotion assembly. In working backwards, we know that's the coping strategy, the action tendency. So if we work backwards from that, of let's slow that down and let's sit with what's the trigger? What's the trigger that happens before that has you turning towards the computer or the device? When are those times that you're most likely to do that? And what's the context around that? Um,
I find a
and
lot of time they don't know. Like a lot of it, they're like they may be people who work on the computer for a living. They work from home, and it's like it's just there. It's easy, and again, maybe they're not aware of the trigger. So how do you
maybe.
work backwards into the trigger when they don't even have awareness around the trigger?
Well, I sort of feel like there are two ways. Like one is there any dissonance? Because when people say I don't know, they maybe not really leaning in with curiosity there in terms of, why do I do this? What is this? What is this giving me, or what is this
Like
taking away?
hesitant
Um,
to look inside and really figure out the answer.
Yeah, because we only do that when we're motivated to do that. And so it may be that there aren't any negative consequences, and that this isn't a big deal, and that we've got a therapy agenda issue here where maybe it's more of a bother to the partner than it is to the person looking at the porn. So I sort
It's
of
an
feel like
important
where's
difference.
Yeah, like where's the curiosity? So is there dissonance about this? Like, because that is another thing that I found interesting in the research is that even separate from frequency of use, feeling bad about using it seemed to predict whether people identified as having a problem with it. So their beliefs about porn from like a values perspective had more impact on the actual frequency in terms of themselves feeling bad about it. But that said, the flip side is that you might have someone who doesn't have that dissonance. They're comfortable with porn and they don't feel bad that they're doing it, but they're doing it a lot and it's having negative consequences. So for either groups of people, the negative consequences are there. And so that might be one area that you could lean into in trying to understand the mechanism and leaning into the dilemma between I find myself reaching for this, but it makes me feel bad, or but it has bad consequences in my life, and
I
sitting
think that's
there.
kind of what's really hard about pornography too, when it comes to is it addiction or not, because for a lot of people and a lot of couples that I've worked with, it feels like there really aren't negative consequences.
Mhm.
And maybe there's some dissonance about the negative consequences in the relationship. Like the porn user sees the problem is their partner having a problem with them using porn, not them
Yeah,
actually using porn. And
yeah,
so, there's that. And so they don't, it's not like tequila. When you drink yourself too much, then you can't drive and you may slur your words. It doesn't have that kind of same impact. So it can be a little more sneaky there in the way
yeah,
that it impacts you. And I know that is research to show how it impacts the brain and actually shrinks the brain, but it's
yeah.
not something that's going to have obvious, like, automatic
No,
uh, symptoms. So, it's hard for them. There's not really constant unless they're like spending more and more money on like different types of porn or chat rooms or stuff and getting themselves into financial ruin. But with so much free porn,
yeah,
so that's really hard when there's not a lot of
it
consequence.
is. Well, um I think that's where again EFT helps us to lean in with curiosity and see whether we can explore some of the nooks and crannies there, because if there are some conflicts within the person using porn around their beliefs and values, that can be a little way in. If there's
So would
secrecy
you
and
ask
hiding,
would you ask them, like,
yeah,
are you like, are you cool with viewing porn, or does any part
yes,
of you like say, I know I shouldn't be looking at this, but I can't help myself or something?
yes, yeah, definitely. How do you feel about your use of pornography? How does this sit with you inside? How do you feel after? How do you feel before? What sort of role is it playing for you? How is it helping you? How is it hindering you? I think also looking at the consequences in a person's life, like how much time might you spend, how much money might you spend, uh, how does it impact their mood, but then also looking at how it impacts their relationship, because if this is a couple sitting on our couch, then clearly there is an impact for them at the level of their bond, and they may differ in their interpretation of what is threatening their bond. But just knowing that there is tension and disconnection between the two of them, that's an in as well.
And so how do we really broach this? I mean, as a therapist, when couples come in and one person's complaining of porn use, um, how do you really help to illuminate the picture? So I know in EFT, as you mentioned, we have a very non-pathologizing stance. It's
Yeah,
emotionally focused therapy. If you're new to, if you've not watched any of our previous videos, um, and it's all about attachment and bonding, right? And emotion regulation and behavior.
yeah,
And we're really about trying to create connection. And so EFT has a method, it has a plan, it's mapped out, it's got all the research that it's the gold standard now. We know it works, we know how it works, we know why it works. So folding porn into as a therapist, holding porn use into, and I know a lot of therapist issues can come up here if they have their own sensibilities about porn, you know, it can be a struggle with how do I reflect what's happening within the couple without imposing my own views about porn into it,
Yeah.
without going into you shouldn't be watching porn versus like, is
Yes.
this working for you guys? Right?
Yeah.
How does this impact your relationship? And if one person doesn't see it's a problem and the other person does, how do you sort of broach that in EFT sessions?
Well, I think that is so, so important. You're saying so many important things there about how do we manage our own self of the therapist's reactions to talking about these sorts of sensitive issues, and being able to be aware of our own bias that could be there, and really consciously trying to put that aside and really connecting with the relationship in front of us, with the partnership in front of us. And I feel like the first question I might ask is, how is porn feeling threatening in your bond in these moments when there's tension? I want to really understand how it shows up between them and what happens between them when it does show up. Uh, I want to just be really curious, like, how do they both feel about porn? Do they have any agreements in place? Is this something that they talk about comfortably? How has this come to become a point of tension in their relationship? Often there may have been no discussion and then suddenly it was discovered, or there might have been discussion and agreement that has then been broken. But I think that their discussions around how porn is going to be in their life or not, that really determines then the level of distress. So we want to know, is it showing up because there's a discrepancy in beliefs about pornography, that one thinks it's okay and one really doesn't? Or is it that they have shared beliefs, but frequency of use of one partner has now become a problem? Like, that can be a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we would really be assessing for, you know, I love how you say coming in with this lens of curiosity. How does this show up? How does this play out between you guys?
Yeah.
And, you know, do we have any mutual understandings? Does it feel like those mutual understandings are being violated or crossed?
Yeah.
Are we not able to have mutual understandings? What happens when we try to talk about this?
Yes.
And how are both people, so maybe one of us is okay with the porn use and the other's not, but I would imagine both people are not okay with the distress in the relationship, with the conflict that it can cause. So
Yeah.
how do they feel about the conflict?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really nice way of zooming out, because what we're
Mhm.
dealing with here in that scenario is a difference. And differences feel threatening where there's insecurity. I love Sue's quote about where there's security, a difference is just a difference, but where there's insecurity, every difference is a potential abyss.
Yeah,
And
like a
that
threat.
really helps me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That helps me to look at, how is porn becoming a threat?
yeah.
How is it showing up, and how is it creating distance? How is it triggering for each partner in different ways? How are they getting caught? I feel like I've seen it show up in 4 different presentations. Like, one is the discrepancy in beliefs, as you're saying here, like one partner might be fine with it and the other might not be. I've seen it show up when there's agreement, but frequencies become an issue, and it's then impacted their sexual connection. So, I mean, we know that in hetero couples, it's more likely males are using more porn than females, and the research seems to show that females are impacted negatively. They feel lower self-esteem, lower sexual desire, and males can be impacted to do with frequency. Then it leads to impaired sexual function. So they may have similar ideas about pornography, but it's now showing up and creating problems. They may have different ideas, and that alone is causing problems. So they're the first 2. And then the third one that I've seen a little, it's more rare, but it's where the content of the porn itself is traumatizing for one member. So I had a
Like if we're
couple.
watching some kind of like rape porn or something.
Oh, yeah, that would be, yes. I had a couple where they were a heterosexual couple who'd been married for 40 years, and the male partner had been watching wrestling porn since his teens. And it was not that, I mean, he'd really explored, was he really gay, and had he just sort of squished this part of him aside? And he really felt like watching wrestling images was paired with his sexual response, and that he was comfortable with his sexuality. He'd explored whether he was gay, but he really wanted to make it work with his wife. But the content of what he was looking at was really distressing to her and made her worry about his sexuality. Like, is he not attracted to me as a woman? So that was one where content really showed up. One of my colleagues had an example where the partner watching porn, that was triggering because the female partner had a trauma history. And so the very fact that he was looking at porn itself was triggering of her trauma. It sort of turned the way she viewed him from her safe other to now a scary potential perpetrator. So sometimes the content alone can be really alarming. And then I've seen the fourth type is where it actually feels like a betrayal. It feels like a total betrayal of an unspoken agreement or a spoken
like
agreement.
You're kind of cheating on me because you're looking at another woman's naked body or a naked man's body and not mine.
Yeah, that has much more of an attachment injury feel to it.
Yeah.
So it really does depend on where they sit in terms of how we might lean in and work with them in EFT.
And you mentioned, that men can have impaired sexual functioning, and I imagine some people might be asking, well, how does that show up? And one of the ways I see it, and I want you to add, where you see it, is what happens is they view porn in a certain context, like internet and like their iPad, their device, or whatever, and they kind of start. It's almost like classical conditioning, like conditioning the erotic charge to go with that specific stimulus. And it gets paired with such a strong response that they have a hard time really getting into and getting aroused by in-person sex, especially if the sex does not resemble what they see in the porn. It's just really hard for them to get aroused. And so the erotic charge is not with the in-person sex, even though logically, I think most people will be like, well, wouldn't you prefer to have in-person sex? Wouldn't that be more exciting? And theoretically, yes. But when you have that erotic charge that's been kind of beat into your brain, in this certain way, then it's your brain just pairs like this response that your brain grabs onto, even if the rest of your body wants to try to do something different. What else have you seen?
I've definitely seen what you're describing here, and I've also seen that the context is different. So the context of looking at a screen, being by yourself, and masturbating in a certain style can be completely different from real world sexual encounter, even down to what they call an idiosyncratic masturbatory style. Which is just, a type of sensational stimulation that does not resemble real life intercourse. And so that of course changes the context, changes the stimulation entirely. But also part of that context is the other person. Like, using a screen, there is no other person to have to account for. There is no risk of rejection or misinterpretation or hurt feelings, where real person,
and there's no work. You don't have to work to get them aroused either.
Exactly. So there's a lot of different things that make it much more safe and predictable in the context, that then real world sex can feel the opposite. I also, a client comes to mind where he struggled with using online pornography, and then in real life encounters with his partner, he felt like he was disappointing her. And she would protest, not because he wasn't skilled, but because she could sense the distance. And so when she protested, he interpreted that he was letting her down and getting it wrong. And so that then impacted his desire and arousal and made him avoid real life sex and turn to the screen more. So it kind of gets caught in a pattern, an interactional pattern there.
So this, basically this can show up in a variety of ways. And
Yeah.
what I'm wondering is if you're a client who's or potential, somebody who's watching this wondering, you know, how much is this impacting me, or maybe my partner's complained about it. Are there maybe some questions you might recommend that somebody self-reflect on to, if they're interested in asking themselves if this is a problem? What might they ask themselves if they're watching this?
I think really, how is this playing out in my life? How do I feel about this? Uh,
Maybe
what?
how big of a presence does this have in my life? Like
Yeah,
how
yeah,
how much time do I devote, or how much energy do I devote to viewing this?
yeah. And also looking at what does it give me? Because I think when we can really acknowledge what are the positives that I derive from something, then it helps us
Mhm.
get closer to the needs.
Yeah.
I had one man talk about how at the end of a really hard week, porn felt like treating himself. It felt like indulging himself and kind of unwinding. And so that was really key to us working with it, because while he saw it like that, it had caused problems in his relationship, and he had dissonance around feeling not good about it. And so when we can leverage the need against the costs, then it
Yeah.
can create some movement there.
Yeah. Maybe as you're saying that, I'm thinking of another question is, has your partner complained about the
Yeah.
pornography use? And are you willing to really examine
Yeah.
what your partner is saying and really have a talk with yourself on the inside about, um, could this really be a problem for my
Yeah.
relationship?
And
That can
and
be a hard
how does it
question.
feel? Yeah, it sure is. And even maybe even a thinner slice is, how do I feel about this when my partner raises it? Like when my partner is concerned about this, what is that like for me? What's the meaning I'm making around that? Because the partner's criticism of this or protest about the other's use of pornography, that's going to be a potent trigger. And so I'd be curious, what is it like when your partner objects? What happens inside for you? I want to know more about the dilemma, the struggle, like what makes them hold on to this? What does it mean to them? And what would it mean to lean in and listen to their partner's objection? Because for some people, it might not be about the porn. It might be about, personal feeling of autonomy and freedom. And that when my partner complains about pornography, I'm interpreting that as them controlling me and not allowing me to be myself. And that feels really scary. It might not be actually that the person really needs the porn and they're holding on to it because they're addicted. It might be that they're really trying to say, I need to have a voice and what I want matters here. And if I give up something that matters to me, even though it doesn't matter as much as you might fear, then I lose something. So it feels like we want to explore, what is this giving a person and what is this taking away? What's the meaning around it? What is it like when they see the impact on their relationship, when they see that it hurts their partner? How do they react? What would it cost them to make changes? What would that mean
And
for them?
do they find themselves kind of being willing to sacrifice a lot for the sake of holding on to their porn habit? That might be
Yes,
really telling also. What am
it
I
might.
willing to give up to keep my porn? Has my porn become more important than my relationships?
Yes, yeah.
Even if the relationships are healthy, you know?
Yeah, yeah, we want to know all those ins and outs of, what does this mean? What would it mean to let go of it? What would it mean to hold on to it? And what is it helping me with? How is it hindering me?
Yeah.
They're all so important in really fleshing this out.
Yeah. What do I get out of it? And if you're a partner watching this and you do have concerns, is there a way that you might recommend that they bring it up to their partner that they have concerns?
Well, certainly openness, trust, and honesty seems to reduce distress around porn, even when there are differences in beliefs about it. So maybe approaching it from that angle in saying, I know this is a difference and I'm not judging you, and I'm also not judging me for being bothered, but we have a difference here and I'm worried that this is going to come between us. How can we talk about this in a way that isn't going to push us further apart? How can we make sure our connection stays prioritized here? I'm worried. Can you help me with that worry?
Yeah. So I love the way that you really say this. And I hope that if you're watching this, and you do have concerns, that you feel comfortable bringing it up.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully your partner is open to hearing that you have concerns. And
Yeah.
certainly therapy can be a great resource, especially emotionally focused therapy, because we really do have a way of getting to the heart of it
Yeah.
without really judging, because it's not our place to judge, right? We just are more concerned with what's working for you guys and what's not, and
Yeah.
what's creating connection, what's not creating connection.
That's
And
right.
yeah.
And,
So, and
porn
mhm,
can be positive.
yeah,
I mean, research shows if couples watch it together, there's less likely to be negative impacts. But we're not
yeah,
going to be prescribing that, and we're not going to be prohibiting it. We're going to be looking
right.
at how is the health of your bond? How does this show up and threaten
Mhm.
the precious connection that you have? We want to be
Yeah.
here to guard that and help strengthen the bond between you.
And if you're a therapist and you're wanting to do more assessment, I mean, do you ever get a sense that maybe the porn user may feel uncomfortable disclosing or talking in great detail about their porn use to the
Yes.
therapist?
Yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah.
what could therapists kind of keep an eye out for, or how could they ask about porn use in a way that might be seeming the least threatening?
Well, I think it just needs to be a bit more normalized. We actually do a screen in our questionnaires at the beginning for all relationships when they start in therapy with us, just looking at, are you concerned about your use of alcohol, your partner's use of alcohol, your use of substances, your partner's use of substance, your use of pornography, your partner's use of pornography. We just put it in just a very light screening measure so that way we know straight away whether someone's concerned about their own use of pornography or their partner's. And so that really can help raise it then in the initial sessions of how are things between you? What are the concerns that you're having? Can you talk about those concerns? What happens when you do? Some couples can struggle with issues with pornography. Has that been an issue for the two of you? Like, I just sort of put it out there very evenly at first and normalize that this can sometimes show up, and then see their reactions. And then at the individual sessions, that's when I might explore that a little bit more and really validate that this can be a healthy, happy part of their sexual connection, or it can sometimes cause distress when there's differences between them. And how do they feel about the presence or absence of pornography in their life?
Yeah. So these are a lot of really amazing questions, and you guys may have to pause and rewind and take some notes because this is really good stuff. And so, Claire, you're really amazing. Do you teach classes on this
I have in the past done a one-day workshop, and
for
then
therapists?
yes, and then I've done shorter ones, more specifically looking at the relationship and how we might work with a relationship using EFT where there's problematic pornography use. So yeah.
Okay. So, if folks want to find you, if they want to contact you and have you come do an EFT training around pornography, or anything, I mean, where can people find you? Like, do you have any material out there? Have you written anything?
They can find me on the ACEFT website, which is aceft.com.au. So that's the Australian Centre for EFT. Or I have a tiny little YouTube channel with some short videos on there. So they just look for my name on YouTube. That's
Perfect.
probably the best way, is via the website, though.
And they can email you on the website as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe couples who are struggling with pornography in their relationship, they could email you and ask, hey, how do I broach the subject of getting therapy for this with my partner. And
Yeah.
or if you're a therapist who'd like to get more trained, they can contact you through your website.
Yes, sure.
Perfect. And I will make sure that I put the link to the website and your YouTube channel in the description for this video. And, so Claire, I just wanted to say thank you again so much for really being with us today, helping us with your wisdom around such an important topic. And, I'd love to have you back, maybe even do a part 2 about this because it is such a good topic. And so thank you again so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
You're welcome. And I just want to say thank you to our viewers. You've been amazing, and thank you for the positive feedback. Keep the ideas flowing. If there's a topic within EFT you'd like to see me do, by all means, please contact me, and I'd be more than happy to do that. Make sure you also buy my book, Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients, available on Amazon and my website, drbugatti.com. And make sure that you go visit Claire on her website and you look her up and see her work and watch her YouTube videos. And make sure that you hit subscribe to the We Heart Therapy channel because there are more videos on the way.
Don't forget to buy my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients, for helping professionals. Available on Amazon or on my website, www.drbugatti.com.